Media can tell stories in many ways. You have movies, TV shows, video games, and many more. And each mediums have their unique way of storytelling, which work best when done in their respective medium. Stuff like cinematography to show emotions for movies, the sheer length of stories told through a TV show, or for video games, it's the fact that you are playing it. Today I want to focus on the last one, and specifically Undertale. Quickly before we get into it, if you do enjoy this video, please like and subscribe, it helps me out a ton. I also made a community Discord, you can join that, link in the description. Now before we get into Undertale, let's go a bit more into depth on what the storytelling quirk for video games is. Because the uniqueness of video games comes from two things, from its interactivity, the fact that you are playing it, the fact that you are involved, and storytelling through game mechanics. Which is where a game uses its mechanics to convey emotions or parts of its story, somewhat resembling cinematography in film. Now I believe that Undertale pushes both of these to their absolute limits, and this video will explore the mechanics of this storytelling, which means that there are spoilers for the entirety of Undertale and maybe a tiny bit of Deltarune. Undertale uses a lot of traditional RPG tropes and slightly changes them up to create an intricate storytelling experience. And the two most prevalent of these mechanics are the battle menu and the saving and loading. To show what I mean though, let's start with a smaller example with the Undertale narrator. Now, usually in media, a narrator is used to, well, narrate the story.
Who crawl through a river of shit.
But in RPG games, the narrator has a more unique role, intended to guide you through the game by telling you about enemies, commenting on items you find, and reading out signs. It is usually not something diegetic, as it exists just to make the game more playable for you. Undertale, however, heavily implies that the narrator guiding you at a lot of points is actually Kara, a character that, although very important to the story, we see only once on screen. Undertale deals with this by giving us small bits of characterization through the narrator, and even foreshadows small details about Kara's story. But this is a pretty surface level detail. Hell, Narakara, as the theory was dubbed, came out over 8 years ago. But it shows that Undertale is very willing to play with your expectations of these RPG tropes. Now to get into the battle system, which in Undertale is one of the biggest things that help it in its meta storytelling. To start this section off, I have to first explain the basics of how the battle system works in Undertale, and then we can talk about how it uses this. First and most importantly, the battle system in Undertale is diegetic, which means that it is real in the universe. The monsters can interact with it just as much as you can. The monsters know how it works and what its purpose is. I'll talk about this more later. Now to the other basics, because Undertale uses a turn-based combat system, which means that when it's your turn, your enemy cannot do anything, and when it's their turn, all you can do is dodge. For now. When it is your turn, you have 4 options. You can fight, act, item, or mercy. Fight option, simple enough. You get a prompt to attack, and you hit the enemy for a certain amount of damage. Item option is so you can use items to heal, and depending on the item, it's possible to affect certain battles, but most of the times it's just healing. Mercy and Act are where it gets interesting though, as these are the core mechanics that differentiate Undertale from most traditional RPGs. The Act option gives you the opportunity to talk to these monsters, which can range from complimenting them to joking with them or even flexing on them. Each monster has its own set of acts, which is used to massively flesh out these characters, tell you stuff about their lives and makes you care about them that much more. This mechanic gets really cool when you look at it combined with the Mercy option. The Mercy option lets you spare enemies after certain conditions are met, often after you choose the right act choices. Now with these basics laid out, the game can start giving you subtle hints about details about the world, like the tiny detail that you have to be taught how battles work. Because when you first get into the underground, Flowey approaches you and tries to steal your soul. However, as you can maybe see, there is no battle menu here, and Flowey starts the battle on his turn, something that only happens 2 other times in the game, for reasons I'll get to in a second. But as we can tell from this detail, we don't know how battles work until Toriel actually explains them to us, which is why we in the very first introduction don't have it yet, and it only appears after Toriel tells us about fights that the menu shows up against Dummy. Throughout the rest of the game, we see the mechanics of the game be ever so slightly altered to convey emotions and further characterize these monsters. Stuff like Napstablook being too tired to attack, or Railguard 1 attacks becoming shaky when he gets nervous. In every major boss fight of the game, we can also see at least some kind of unique storytelling, like when Toriel avoids you when you get to low HP for a more obvious one, or in the Asgore fight being the first time the battle system gets shaken up as a whole. The fight starting out with Asgore doing this. Removing the core mechanic that made this game special, telling you that you have no other choice. And even though the fight starts by removing the choice to not fight, everything else about the fight screams that Asgore does not want to do this. Him saying he's not ready to fight you, him not even wanting to face you during the fight. The talk option giving you 3 responses. His hands trembling, his breathing getting funny, and even his defense and attack dropping. The soundtrack sounding like mixed feelings, and being a fucking banger, yet it's no good. The mercy button disappearing is the true signifier that there is no other choice. Asgore destroying it tells us that he is scared he would otherwise be convinced. Scared that he would otherwise be convinced to let you go. You have to fight Asgore, no matter the fact that both of you don't want to. No matter how much you want to keep this pacifism, this has to happen. On the complete opposite side of the game's route, in the Sans fight, the game flips the entire battle system on its head, while still maintaining what happens here on the other routes. Normally you meet Sans here for your judgment, where he will reflect on your actions throughout the game, hold up a mirror for how your actions impacted the world. In the murder route, however, the judgment has turned from a speech into a full-on battle. But the theme of holding up a mirror still remains, as Sans throughout the battle acts a lot as if he was the player. Starting with the fact that he gets the first turn on the battle, which might seem insignificant but happens in none of the other conventional battles. It serves as a first sign to show you that Sans is more powerful than you think. The second is when you realize that Sans can dodge your attacks, just like you can. And after 12 attacks, Sans shows the first sign of getting tired and gives you the option to spare him. If you take this option, he dunks on you, which is a betrayal kill, mirroring the fact that with most boss monsters you can pull off that, which is where you first meet the option to spare the boss and then you kill them in one hit, just like what Sans does here. When you finally do get to his final attack though, he knows he can't beat you. He knows that you will just reset and try over. So he just does nothing. Because the battle menu is diegetic, Sans knows how it works. He knows that as long as it's not your turn, you can't attack. Or so everyone thought. The fact that we attack here not once but twice, I believe reveals that the battle system doesn't actually revolve around turn-based combat, but rather the only thing that matters is if your soul can get to the option. Now my interpretation for why we can move the box here is that the monsters themselves are in control of the battle box, and to a certain point the battle menu. As we can see, the box and menu behave differently depending on the monsters. Frogget and Blookie have attacks that use the box as a solid wall, while a character like Undyne allows their attacks to come from or go outside the box, while other characters like Sans and Papyrus can even influence the size and shape of the box. We can kind of see when you get more powerful you can adjust the menu more and more. Maybe the most extreme example of this is the 2 Flowey fights. Now in the Omega Flowey fight he has the power of 6 human souls and uses that to completely obliterate the battle system. Not only confirming that the battle system isn't actually turn-based combat and just based on your soul / determination, there is not even a box here anymore. Flowey just being in complete control of this battle, only giving you the option to fight him because he knows he has a save, only allowing you to attack just to play with you. The Omega Flowey fight completely disconnects him and you from the world of Undertale, the window name even changing to Flowey Tale, and this is why the battle menu is completely gone. But then you might say, why in the Azrael Dreamer fight is the battle menu there? He has the power equivalent of 7 human souls after all. I'll give my explanation to that in a second, but first let's actually break down this battle menu. Because although the options are here, are they really? When you try to fight, it does nothing. When you try to mercy, it does nothing. In the active menu, all there is hopes and dreams, and no option to actually interact with Asriel. This shows that even though the battle menu is still there in appearance, Asriel had made it so none of the options actually matter. And later he even creates an entirely new option, the save option. I think the menu is still here this time because Asriel Dreamer still has some connection to the world. As Asriel, his goals have changed to wanting to go back to how it used to be, wanting to go back to the time when Carol was alive, wanting to go back to Undertale. The box in this fight also fits this interpretation, as almost every attack of Asriel changes the box majorly, the Hyper Goner even removing it entirely. Oh. Okay, I think we got a bit off track here. The point that I was trying to make was that when Sans falls asleep, he loses the control over the box as he's, well, asleep. And you can affect it because at this point you are also very powerful. We can also see in the final Asgore fight, the fight beginning without the mercy option. Being a parallel to Asgore destroying it on the other routes, now we destroy it, signifying that Asgore doesn't have the choice this time. We attack before the text box of the menu is even there. We've surpassed the need for the battle system. We have become too powerful for it. With that, we've just talked about how we can see how Undertale uses a normally very simple and straightforward mechanic in many very tiny ways, which result in it feeling like an actual part of this world and account to many small bits of characters and lore. That said though, let's get into the final point of this video, which is how Undertale deals with player agency. Now the great thing about video games and the story within comes from two things, storytelling through game mechanics and player agency, which comes down to how the game deals with the fact that the story has a player, someone on the outside looking in, interacting with the story. Traditionally there is three ways of dealing with this. The first is where the game acts like you don't exist, you're just playing a character in the story and your choices don't matter or barely matter. Think of games like God of War, Legend of Zelda, overall the more cinematic, normally one-ending story experiences. The second is where the game acknowledges your choices, making the fact that you're playing the game matter, but still making you play a character, still the game not acknowledging you are something else than the character. For this, think of games like Detroit Become Human and Paper Plea. They have multiple endings, but they don't break the fourth wall. The third is the really meta one, where the game acknowledges your existence. Whether this be in Doki Doki Literature Club, where Monica knows you exist outside this world, or even in something like One Shot, where you literally are a character. The game doesn't just acknowledge you, it pulls you into the story and uses you and your resources for its puzzle and or story. Now, Undertale is none of those, and the second and third combined. Undertale's approach to player agency is very unique. While it's meta and your choices significantly impact the story, none of the characters acknowledge you as a separate entity from the character you play. The conclusion Andrew Cunningham reached in his masterpiece of a video essay was that Undertale believes in a player. That Undertale the game knows it has a player, just none of its characters do. With that info, the game repeatedly leverages
that knowledge to convey meaning.
And with a lot of other complications in this video, this leads to his conclusion that the very act of doing a true reset, the very act of replaying the game, would make your previous experience lose value, and in a way invalidate the feelings that you had for this game. Or at least that was my interpretation. Go watch the video, it's incredible. The first part of this conclusion I very much agree with. The second part, we'll come back to it later, because I first need to explain how that first conclusion was reached. Because the most important thing for the meta-narrative of Undertale is the fact that saving and loading is diegetic to this game, which allows the game to literally break time and space to do its storytelling. The most infamous example of this being that at the start of the game, if you kill Toriel, then reset and spare her the second time around, Flowey will call you out on it, revealing that you are not the only one with this power, and that before you started playing, before Frisk fell into the underground, he had that power, he had the power to reset. This already kind of shows that Undertale will acknowledge your actions as the player in a certain way, as it's not Frisk resetting here, it's us. Flowey doesn't quite know that, of course, he thinks it's Kara. But what we can tell from this is that Undertale as a game knows this, and will use this knowledge to reference the fact that the world is like a game, with stuff like leveling up when you kill people, the whole battle system I rambled about. The world requires a player to work as well as it does. That was a short summary of one of the points Andrew Cunningham made. Again, go watch this video, it's really fucking good. But my conclusion for the ending slightly differs from his. His came down to Undertale making even the true reset diegetic. Yet, when you reset, it would invalidate the feelings you had in your previous experience, because you would just throw it away just to play the game again. This is where I kind of disagree though, as I think the act of doing the true set is not just diegetic to the game, I think it reveals the true story of Undertale. Undertale has of course multiple endings, and thus multiple stories. I believe, however, that Undertale is intended to have one main story. The story of a vicious cycle, where you go through the neutral route, then a true pacifist, and then a genocide. Not specifically in any order. The cycle of resetting, keeping this world back for eternity. These characters fated to become victims of genocide runs, enjoyers of true pacifist runs, and suffer through neutral routes. This is what Undertale predicts you will go through, and this is what Flowey went through. And if you get emotionally attached to these characters, this is what you're bound to go through. Even if you don't dare to actually do the through reset, you are bound to look up a playthrough, watch someone else go through, and still watch these characters suffer this cycle. So I don't think Undertale actually has an ending, because if you're watching this video, you have not stepped away from this game yet, you have not broken the cycle yet. So that's my theory, I guess. This was meant to be more of an analysis, but when writing the script it kind of stopped being outright facts, so do with that as you will. But to summarize, I think that Undertale has two stories. You have the story of the specific route, the Asriel turning into Flowey, the genocide stuff, the war of human and monsters, and then you have the true story. The one where you and Flowey and other people played through the game, the one where you get super attached to the characters, the one where you save everyone, the one where you kill everyone, and the story where you reset once again, where you look up another YouTube video. This story is the story of a game and could not have been pulled off by any other medium, and honestly couldn't have been pulled off by any other person than Toby. Now, there are probably holes in these theories or analysis, and I invite anyone who wants to give their own analysis. Maybe this isn't even original, it's been thought of 7 years ago, and I'm just completely wrong. Let me know in the comments. If you did enjoy this video, please subscribe, join my Discord, and with that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.